Okay, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this month's Black History Series presentation titled Creating Global Solidarity Through the Making of an Open Educational Resource on Anti-Black Racism. Today's guest speakers are Dr. Nadia Prendergast, Adedayo Adegbola, Caitlin Cosgrove, Samin Barakati, and Fabliha Awal. Dr. Nadia Prendergast is an assistant professor at Toronto Metropolitan University. She teaches community health and prenatal health in the third-year nursing program and is the lead in the production of an open education resource to support nursing education in understanding anti-racism. Having a special focus on anti-Black racism, Dr. Prendergast's area of research addresses the experiences of Black nurses and millenniums and Generation Z in nursing. As part of the team of faculty, stakeholders, and students, she has spearheaded this unique, one-of-a-kind project to support Canadian nursing in challenging anti-Black racism in its education and practices. Adedayo Adegbola is a nursing student in his fourth year at Toronto Metropolitan University, and is an engaged member of the African Canadian community at TMU and has contributed to the development of anti-Black OER as a co-author. Caitlin Cosgrove is a fourth-year nursing student in the Bachelor of Science in Nursing program at the Toronto Metropolitan University. She has been involved in over 15 research projects as both a research assistant and student advisory member at TMU and Centennial College. Samin Barakati is a fourth-year nursing student at Toronto Metropolitan University who is currently involved in a range of research and mental health advocacy initiatives. Samin has contributed to this project by researching the contributions of nurses of color to the development of the nursing profession. Fabliha Awal is a Muslim South Asian fourth-year Bachelor of Science in Nursing student at TMU. She is currently aspiring to be an emergency and medicine nurse with future goals of becoming a clinical educator with a focus on safe cultural care. We are very excited today to have our presenters share this very significant project. While our presenters are speaking, if everyone could please mute their microphones and turn off their cameras as not to distract our presenters, that would be appreciated. Following their presentation, there will also be a question and answer period, so just type your questions in the comment section, or you can raise your hand and I will call on you. At that point, you can turn your mic on and your camera on as well. One final note, if you would like to support programming such as our Black History series, you can also go to our website, amherstburgfreedom.org, to donate. Now I'm going to turn it over to our amazing speakers. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lorene. Can everyone hear me? You can all hear.
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So as Lorene mentioned, my name's Nadia Prendergast. I'm the assistant professor at Toronto Metropolitan University. And we want to say on behalf of all of us, the students who are with me today, thank you for celebrating Black History Month, and thank you to the Amherstburg Freedom Museum for the hard work you're doing just to keep the history and the experiences of Black people on the map for us. So the question we want to ask is, why are we here? And what is anti-Black racism, and what does it have to do with us? And I wondered if Samin could just change the slides, just that we could just have some time to think on these issues. Before we go further, we're going to do the land acknowledgement.
So the City of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, as now is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples.
Thank you so much, Fabliha. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So we're here to talk about a project that we did, and we hope that you'll gain something from it. So we're going to start, as I mentioned before, for you just to think on some questions as we change to the next slide. And we want to really know the climate that we're living in now. Why are we actually here, and what is anti-Black racism? Can you change the slide, Samin, for us? Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to start off by just having a definition of what is anti-Black racism and how we came to the place we are now. So according to the Ontario government 2021's definition, they say anti-Black racism is prejudice, attitudes, beliefs, stereotyping, and discrimination that is directed at people of African descent and rooted in their unique history and experience of enslavement and its legacy. Anti-Black racism is deeply entrenched in Canadian institutions, policies, and practices to the extent that it is either functionally normalized or rendered invisible to the larger white society. Anti-Black racism is manifest in the current social, economic, and political marginalization of African Canadians, which includes unequal opportunities, lower socio-economic status, higher unemployment, significant poverty rates, and over-representation in the criminal justice system. That is a weighty definition and speaks a lot to us. So we're going to just go back a bit, 2 years, and just position yourself 2 years ago. It's March 13th, 2020, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights at the 43rd session declared something that was special for the Black community. It stated, "The decade is a unique platform that emphasizes the important contributions made by people of African descent to every society and promotes concrete measures to stop discrimination and promote their full inclusion." It was so strange because it was that same month our world was engulfed by a brutal pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, that placed the world into quarantine and social isolation and created a toll on our health, both mentally and physically. But it did not stop there. As the United Nations announced the contributions of Black people, COVID exposed something else happening, the inequitable treatment that we were still receiving as a Black community. Reports from first world countries such as the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada were declaring that Black communities were adversely impacted by the pandemic, shedding light on social injustices. And one of those areas of social injustice was specifically on anti-Black racism being a key driving force to these adversities. Now, the death of George Floyd was witnessed globally. It was like a medieval execution, showing the dehumanization and torture of the Black body. This was not new to the Black community, however, for this has always happened historically and socio-politically. But this time it was different. This time we have a new generation that has emerged, and we call them the mill gens, or in other words, millennials and Generation Z, who they converged globally in solidarity to speak against anti-Black racism. Yes, racism was exposed, but now on a new level. Everyone was implicated, from public services, such as the police in the killing of George Floyd, to the over racist acts toward an Indigenous woman in Canada, Joyce Echequan, who died while seeking treatment at the hands of nurses. The killing of the Asian women in Atlanta followed so close afterwards, as well as the mowing down of a Muslim family who was out taking a family walk. The classroom had changed. Students, nurses were protecting and protesting and wanting to know the truth. And we decided to tell the truth. And this could be done by teaching nurses about racism in nursing. We decided to go to the core. We went straight to anti-Black racism, and we would create an open educational resource and focus on anti-Black racism. But this time, we would be the ones that would tell the story. And by we, I mean a convergence of Black, white, racialized millennials, non-millennials, Gen Zs, Muslims, Jews, Christians, atheists, educators, and students. We would stand in solidarity in taking the first step in creating change. I was convinced by what Malcolm X said when he said, "I, for one, believe that if you give people a thorough understanding of what confronts them and the basic causes that produce it, they'll create their own program. And when the people create a program, you get action. And this is what I did. I began with sharing my ideas with a critical ally, Dr. Jennifer Lapham. After sharing my concerns about creating such a course component on anti Black racism as part of the nursing curriculum, she demonstrated true activism and critical allyship by identifying her privilege as a white woman and a course director. And she took her privilege and shared it with me with a team of 18 people. She encouraged me to take the lead of the project and would give me all the support needed. So today, this is why we're here. We will show how we worked together with all our differences by identifying our positionalities while decentralizing whiteness and working with the common good of humanity by interrogating anti Black racism. We would build our story on 4 chapters. And if we could change the slide, thank you so much. And these chapters would be represented by pillars. They are awareness, empathy, relational, and advocacy. The students will share with you, each one, their experiences through the processes. And I'd love us to start with Adedayo, who will talk on the topic of awareness.
Good afternoon. I am Adedayo and I am thrilled to be speaking with you today. Our discussion begins with the first chapter, which sheds light on the concept of awareness. Awareness is being conscious of the suffering. Chapter 1 is centered on enhancing awareness and conveying a complete understanding of racism and anti-Black racism. It includes understanding the terminology and the discourse surrounding race, racism, and the development of anti-Black racism in the context of historical events, both present and past. Next slide, please. This chapter sheds light on our identity, the events that shaped us, and how history records our journey. My journey specifically centered around the history of slavery in Canada, including underrepresented topics such as Canada's own experience with racism and its own slave trade. Initially, slavery preserved human dignity before the transatlantic slave trade. However, upon the arrival of Europeans in Africa, their cruel treatment led to the complete deprivation of African rights. The children of these slaves were now born into slavery and the horrid treatments that came with it. It was particularly distressing for me to learn that Africans received the Europeans so welcomely, only to be labeled as savages and uncivilized and treated as they were less than humans. Ultimately, this OER serves as a foundation for truthful storytelling and prompts us to acknowledge the past. The OER enabled me to grasp the challenges faced by Black people in Canada. While slavery is often associated with the United States, Canada's slave trade was equally oppressive. The dehumanizing nature of slavery in Canada led to distorted perception of African Canadians. Black History Month is an opportunity to reflect on and correct these historical falsehoods. Through education on this subject, misguided notions about African Canadians can be dismantled. Next slide, please. As a Black Canadian male student nurse, I have dedicated 4 years of my life to acquiring the necessary skills and knowledge to help people. However, it's disheartening to experience reluctance from some people to receive care from me, despite my qualifications. Nonetheless, I am hopeful that continuing to break down barriers and promoting diversity in the healthcare industry, we can work towards a future where everyone has equal access to quality healthcare, regardless of their race or background. I urge you to embrace the knowledge from this chapter and make a difference in society by sharing the true history of Black people in Canada. People must understand the Black community is not what history has falsely made us out to be. We must continue to build a society that recognizes and respects the diversity of our communities. By doing so, we will create a more equitable and just world. Thank you.
Okay, so the next pillar is empathy. Next slide, please. So empathy is the understanding of the process of the dehumanization demonization, and criminalization of the Black body. Next slide, please. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caitlin, and I joined this project as someone who wanted to learn more about anti-Black racism, what I can do to make change, and to contribute my own experiences from the space of being an East Asian woman, especially during the pandemic. So empathy is a central component to nursing practice and for all of us just as human beings. But can you imagine a world without empathy? What would happen? What would that look like? So this question, of course, evokes anger, sadness, frustration, every negative emotion you can think of. But we have unfortunately seen this in anti-Black racism. You see a process of dehumanizing and criminalizing of the Black community. The death of George Floyd demonstrated that violence can only be propagated and excused through the lack of empathy. My role in this project included writing and researching about concepts of white privilege and intersectionality, and of course, to listen to the stories and experiences of Black people and how anti-Black racism plays out in everyday life. As an Asian woman, I'm unable to conceive of the everyday experiences of Black communities, but this chapter provided me with deep insight into the lived experiences and helped me understand violence and racism as I watched it play out in front of my eyes and your eyes, everyone's eyes, in the killing of the Asian woman after the death of George Floyd. The more I learned about anti-Black racism, it helped me understand different social injustices around the world. In my own space, it helped me understand my own experiences with racism and how East Asian people were treated during the pandemic. Empathy helped me to understand that my generation has a role to play in dismantling anti-Black racism through listening, feeling, and understanding. And that is what this chapter of empathy did for me. I was able to move from a state of awareness to a place of empathy as I progressed through the chapters. Next slide, please. And lastly, I leave you with this powerful quote by Martin Luther King. It takes empathy, patience, and compassion to overcome anger, hatred, and resentment. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name's Samin, and I'm a Muslim identifying woman and a first-generation immigrant to Canada. The theme I'll be discussing is relational. So as a student, I wondered why nursing theorists and our orientation to the field of nursing is dominated by white figures and academics, despite nursing itself having a rich history in different cultures and in races. So through this project, we challenged the knowledge being delivered to us since it had discrepancies with the world we lived in and often only delivered a limited perspective of the reality of the field. So generally, we have to be mindful that one historical figure's achievements doesn't overshadow the others, but it's rather a co-creation of history, similarly to how we co-created knowledge in this OER project, coming from a range of backgrounds in the team where one's perspective or contributions didn't cancel or exclude the others. So our goal in this chapter was to rewrite history of nursing to relate to it from any position and race. And we aim to represent the field as inclusive and diverse. So through the following video, I'd like to bring your attention to the contributions of a number of trailblazing nurses of color.
Born in 1805, Mary Jane Grant was a mixed-race Jamaican nurse and businesswoman that cared for British soldiers during the Crimean War. After years of providing medical care in Jamaica and Panama, Mary moved to London in hopes of joining Florence Nightingale and her team of army nurses to assist with medical care for soldiers in Crimea. Although she was turned down, possibly due to her race and lack of hospital experience, Mary funded her own travel to Crimea, setting up a hotel near the battlefields to provide care and comfort to the soldiers. Although many nurses contributed to the Crimean War, Mary's support stood out as she would regularly travel to the front lines to care for soldiers from both sides of the combat. Due to her kindness, she was known as Mother Sequel among soldiers. Upon return to Britain post-war, Mary was granted the Order of Merit by the government of Jamaica and medals from other nations. Despite her contributions being well recognized in Britain at the time, her name was forgotten after her death. Mary had challenged the social norms of the 19th century, overcoming the intersecting barriers of racism and sexism.
Charlotte Edith Anderson Montour, born 1890, was the first First Nations woman to become a registered nurse in Canada and earn the right to vote in the federal election. Although obtaining a high school diploma was uncommon for Canadian women at her time, Edith completed her high school education at Brantford Collegiate Institute. There were few opportunities for her to pursue a nursing education in Canada due to her Indigenous status. Edith moved to the United States to study nursing, where she graduated at the top of her class. In 1917, Edith volunteered to join the U.S. Medical Corps, treating soldiers who were injured during World War I. After the war, she returned to Canada, working at a hospital on the Six Nations Grand River Reserve, where she advocated for improving Indigenous health care.
Fung Agnes Chan was the first Chinese-Canadian nurse to graduate from the Women's College Hospital, WCH, in 1923 in Toronto, Canada. Agnes was born in 1904 in China and was later sold to a Canadian family by her parents in hopes of living a better life. A missionary charity in Toronto later helped her enroll in the WCH for nursing. Although most Canadian nursing schools were not open to accepting nurses of Asian origin until the late 1920s, Agnes was given permission to register at the WCH through an appeal. After graduating with honors, Agnes returned to China, where she worked as a superintendent of nurses at a missionary hospital during a time of political unrest, while single-handedly managing the hospital for a year. For the rest of her career, Agnes cared for and saved hundreds of orphans in China and established a children's home in 1947. Agnes maintained her ties with Canada during her time in China by corresponding with the WCH and updating them on her missionary work.
Centuries before the introduction of modern-day nursing to the Western world by Florence Nightingale, Rufaidah al-Aslamiyah, the first Muslim nurse, pursued and promoted this field in Saudi Arabia. Rufaidah developed her nursing skills by assisting her father, a prominent healer of his time. She then founded the first nursing school and code of conduct in the Muslim world while promoting women's education. Along with the nurses she had successfully trained, Rufaidah cared for the Muslim army during wartime. She also promoted the health of her community by providing health education and care in times of war and peace.
Born in the small town of Owen Sound in Ontario, Marie Scott was one of the first Black nursing students in Canada. Marie Scott had graduated high school with honors and had been labeled an excellent student. Regardless of her exemplary performance in school, Owen Sound General and Marine Nursing School had refused her admission due to her race. The hospital expressed that the sight of a Black nurse at the bedside would kill the patient. After reports of this injustice went to the press, there was a public sentiment against racial discrimination and an outpouring of sympathy. Through public advocacy, Scott was admitted to St. Joseph's Hospital in Guelph in 1947. Scott's admission was the catalyst to breaking down systemic barriers of racial injustice in nursing. However, this monumental moment did not come without issues. Scott's admission to nursing had completely disrupted the exclusionary ideal of the nurse as a middle-class white woman. Maurice endured many instances of racism and injustice throughout her entire career. Although popular and highly successful, Scott's successes were constantly invalidated. Maurice Scott's story has paved the way for Black nursing students and has proved to future students that they too could pursue their dreams. Her experience called for equal access and opportunity for education for Black students across Canada.
Samin, you can stop it. Thanks a lot.
Okay. And you guys hear me? Everything's all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video we created as part of our resource. So as you noticed in the video, all of these nurses were pioneers in their own way, but their trailblazing efforts were often not recognized. We first started with Mary Seacole, who was a British Jamaican nurse who attended to Crimean War soldiers at the same time Florence Nightingale did. And despite her contributions, her name was forgotten after her death. Next, we had, while Mary changed the narrative around nursing on a global level, we then introduced Edith Montour and Agnes Chan, which led such changes in their own land, Canada, at a time where issues of colonialism and ethnic intolerance were prominent. The next nurse we introduced was Rufida. And centuries before the introduction of modern-day nursing to the Western world by Florence Nightingale, Rufida al-Aslamiyah, the first Muslim nurse, she promoted this field in Saudi Arabia. And finally, we had Maurice Scott, who followed the trailblazing efforts of Mary in the Canadian context. And although we often think of racism in the context of American history, but as you saw in the video and my colleague Adedayo pointed out, individuals such as Maurice also had to fight against similar barriers of racism to enter and establish themselves in nursing. So during Black History Month, our aim is to recognize and challenge these historical barriers. And overall, recognizing the contributions of these nurses helps us understand that people like us had a place in this profession, which helps us relate to nursing and promote this field from our own lens. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Fabliha Awal, and the pillar I'll be talking about is advocacy. What we're going to begin with is a video titled The Power of Words. If Samin could just play that for us.
The power of words. Have you thought about what power you hold in your tongue? The words you form can save lives, build empires, cause death and destruction. The power of words. Have you considered how the simple phrases you say without much thought can change one's perception, one's passion, and future forever? The power of words. Chip on your shoulder.
I have heard it all before, and if I haven't heard it, I have felt it. Your fears, glares, and piercing stares telling me I will never be enough, much less perfect. I have felt your silent words scream, why does she have a chip on her shoulder? Never stopping to think that every day I carry more than just my skin. I carry your assumptions, prejudice, and opinion of why I just can't fit in. I just want to be seen, not for who you think I am, but for who I've always been. See me for who I really am and the potential of what I can be. So while I carry this heavy load on my shoulder, I ask one thing, please stop chipping away at me.
Where do you really come from?
Your Canadian is different from mine. Your Canadian is forever. My Canadian has a timeline. Where do you really come from? You ask me in a suspicious tone, making me feel all alienated in a place I should call home. So I give a confused smile while I make the subtle correction. That is not what you are really thinking, or a place you would rather me mention. To you, I'm from everywhere, but I do not belong anywhere, especially not here. Your Canadian is here to stay, but my Canadian will always feel further and further away.
Angry Black woman.
I am Black, but I'm not angry. Because if you did know me, you would know that I love to sing, dance, and live my life freely. I am Black, but I am not angry. You see, I survive, thrive, and utilize every day, learning more and more about my strengths, power, and newfound abilities. I am Black, but I'm not angry. I'm a survivor, protector, and conqueror, so please don't mistake my demeanor for rage or fury. I am Black, but I am not angry. I am a mother, provider, counselor, defender, and a matriarch for my community. I am Black, but I am not angry. I am only human, so I must choose to prioritize my priorities. I am Black, but I am not angry. So I will choose another time to sing, dance, and live my life freely. I am Black, but I am not angry.
I don't see color.
How do you know the sky is blue or the leaves on a tree are green? How do you know it is winter and not summer, fall, or spring if you don't see color? You don't see color because you want to view everyone as the same. But when you paint everyone without color, you ignore each one's obvious pain. You have convinced yourself that there's no difference between them and you. But how would you know there is no difference unless when you say you don't see color, in reality, you actually do?
You are so articulate.
You say I'm not like the rest. Out of all the other ones, I seem to have come out the best. I'm educated, sophisticated, and poised. I don't have an attitude, and I don't make too much noise. You speak highly of me when you compare me to what you think I should be. But maybe you're just unaware of my background and rich history. I come from people who are creative, innovative, educated, cultivated, compassionate, powerful, and exhilarated. So pardon me if I misinterpret what you say, but articulation is not just the way I speak and the way I walk. Articulation is in my DNA.
Go back to where you came from. You tell me to go back to where I come from? I can tell you this place, it would not look the same. And you would only have yourself to blame. Because I would take back everything that was brought here. From the toys your children play with to the extensions you wear in your hair. I would take back the coffee beans from South America you enjoy every morning. Or the spices from South Asia that bring flavor to your life when it seems uncultured, dull, and boring. I would take back all the African diamonds, rubies, and gold to a place where gems are still being discovered and other riches have gone untold. When I make this journey back, I know I won't be left to roam. But I'd like to know, what will you take back with you when you take that journey back home? You, people.
People like me. What does that mean? Do you not breathe the same air that I breathe? Do you not laugh when you're happy or cry when you're sad? Do you not desire good in your life and hurt when things are bad? Why do people like me have to be so different than people like you when we're all trying to understand the meaning of life and ultimately understand the truth? People like me have to be people like you, because whatever we think we see in others is a reflection of what we see in ourselves too. So, who are you people? I think it's pretty simple. People like me are people like you.
We are committed to change.
We are committed to changing our world.
And we are starting by changing our words.
As student nurses from Toronto Metropolitan University, we are creating change.
And creating change now for our world and our future, because we understand the power of words.
Thank you. Just going to get back to our slides. Thank you. And we'll just go to the next slide. Awesome. So what we just watched was The Power of Words, a project that we all worked on to depict the importance of words and how far words can go to change and affect those around them. To change the nursing curriculum and to change how we educate our future students and our current students was crucial, and seeing a truthful depiction of the power of words was the route we chose as a team. I wanted to begin by how important this project in particular was for me. This project really showed me a different perspective on how things can change for the better. Being a nursing student in such a large institution, it was daunting to even think that we would be given the opportunity to become co-authors of an OER and to really implement deep changes into the curriculum. It goes to show the importance of a critical allyship from our faculty and the rest of the team, and goes to show that change is possible with the right drive and the right mindset. So before fully delving into advocacy, I wanted to touch on how I've been working on advocacy projects for most of my life. So I'm not unfamiliar with advocacy, especially as someone who's a Muslim, who's a visible Muslim, who's brown, who wears a hijab, if you weren't unsure. And I'm not new to it, but it's very, very interesting to see how far things can go once we have a team and once we have an OER to work with. If anything, my own experiences have allowed me to further empathize in the plight of anti-Black racism. So what we really want to focus on is advocacy and how it's really about motivating nurses and others into action to becoming contributors in creating anti-racist spaces. So what does that really mean? I want everybody to kind of focus on what that truly, truly means and kind of hang on to it, and we'll kind of delve into it a little bit more. Advocacy really pushes people to voice out those concerns and move to be integral members of change rather than being within the aftermath. It points to taking real initiative and moving forward to make meaningful change for all, sort of like paving like an unpaved path, and you're kind of building that road on your own. What this truly means is that one is working towards becoming a critical ally, something Dr. Prendergast mentioned in the beginning with Dr. Lapham. You can kind of put in the chat box, raise your hand, or even note down on a piece of paper, what do you think a critical ally is? We can move on to the next slide. What we really want to focus on the word is critical. Being an ally often refers to being a silent supporter or a bystander, for lack of better words. And we want to evolve beyond that. Being a critical ally is something we explore throughout our OER, especially in Chapter 4, really looking at the steps to go beyond a bystander and focusing on critical allyship. Critical allyship is an important part of being anti-racist. Proudly labeling yourself an ally is simply not enough anymore. Many self-proclaimed allies approach anti-racism through a non-Black or non-racialized perspective. And while most people have good intentions, this does not necessarily translate into effective and meaningful actions. And that's what we really want to move towards making. As we celebrate Black History Month, we must pay attention to the social injustices happening to those of African descent throughout the world and in our own backyard. Without being an agent, sorry, next slide. Thank you. With being an agent of change, it is key to go beyond social media and do more. That's how we really create change. We want to work to stand up and to implement necessary changes. It is crucial to have intention and to be genuine to the best of your ability. And we hope you choose advocacy above all else when it comes down to it. Thank you.
Okay, hello, can you hear me? My thing just went off just a while ago, so I apologize. I didn't hear that last part, Fabliha. So I'm going to go to the last part of my section. So, sorry, my internet has been very temperamental. So thank you to all the students who shared their experiences through this. In concluding, today we are actively working to dismantle anti-Black racism, as it is pervasive within all our institutions, and that includes nursing and the School of Nursing, in our interactions and in our everyday lives. By bringing awareness to the truth, we are working toward empathy for humanity. And we begin by acknowledging that Black lives do matter. We want to forge relationships that are centered on respect for humanity and for our world. And we are prepared to keep advocating for change on all levels, through course curriculum changes to as high as policy changes. I want to echo the words of Malcolm X at this time when he says I, but we're going to use the word we. We are against every form of racism and segregation, every form of discrimination. We believe in human beings and that all human beings should be respected as such, regardless of their color. So thank you so much for your time to listen to us. And we would love to open if anyone has any questions or thoughts or comments.
Yes, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And those videos were amazing. I mean, what an amazing resource you are all working on. And I really loved the connections that you each drew to your pillar. I mean, that was really fantastic. Thank you so much. So we'll open it up to any questions from audience members. If you wanted to type your question into the chat, or if you wanted to say a comment or a question, just raise your hand. Even if you just wanted to compliment our speakers, that's great too. And while our audience is thinking of questions or comments, I did want to ask a question, and I apologize if you did mention this already, but the resource that you've created, is it fully complete, and is it only accessible in the nursing profession, or can the public access it as well? Because I feel like it's a responsibility not only of those in the nursing profession or medical profession, but also those outside to learn how they can better themselves and contribute to the cause. So I'm just wondering about when it is going to be fully available, and who it's available to.
Thank you for asking, Lorene. It's actually available for everybody. It takes a nursing perspective to understand, because nursing for a long time has always been known as a caring profession. And if we see racism happening in nursing, it can actually happen really covertly, but it has the same damage. And so anybody can have this, they can share it with their family. They don't have to be a nurse, but they can understand, as the point that the chapter 2 talks about, the lack of empathy is an issue. So I think we've put the link on the slides. Have we got it on the slides? If you can just go to that slide, and we can actually put it in the chat. So if someone can put it in the chat for us, you can just click on it, and it is open for public viewing from now. Thank you, Lorene.
Excellent. I'm so glad that it is available to others. I do see the link in the chat, and I will share that as well following your presentation. We do have another question Irene says, thank you for an awesome presentation. I was wondering how you have or will incorporate this into the nursing program.
Okay, yes, thank you very much for asking, Irene. What we've actually done, these are all fourth year students, so I'm just so glad they haven't done their exams yet, and they were part of this process. And they were very much aware of the issues during the COVID. So they were in lockdown for the 2 years. So coming out, they have been instrumental in really promoting it by being part of this. And what we've done, we've actually opened it for first years. So we've said, because first years, as soon as they've left high school, there is a gap in understanding the role of nursing and the effects that they can give to nursing. So if we can start at first year, we can start to build on this, that by the time they get to be fourth year, like these students are, they will have all the components, all the pillars. They will have an awareness, they will have empathy, working with patients and working with colleagues. They will build relationships and understand an identity from the different places they come from with nursing. And the fourth one, they will become advocates and activists to ensure that racism doesn't continue in nursing. So it will be part of the first year at our university. And we're hoping that other universities, schools, anywhere will take this up and use it as a learning tool for them.
Actually, that was going to be a follow-up question I was going to have is, how are you getting it out? Are you getting it out to other universities to encourage them to use it?
Well, so far there's been very much an interest in what we're doing, and this has been the good part of having students involved, because this is the generation talking to us. And so we've come to you, which thank you, you invited us for this, and this is one way. There is a big conference happening for nurses for the whole of Canada, so we've been accepted to talk on this. So that's one way we want to disseminate it. And we hope also to have other means by which we can go, or if anyone here has any means they want to invite us, we will definitely go and talk, because we want to bring this out, that it's not limited just to nursing, but to any field, that they can understand the whole issue of anti-Black racism.
Excellent. And I will definitely be sharing the link for your resource, because I think everybody needs to know about this. I had another question. You'd mentioned the pandemic, and I was wondering if any or all of you could speak to your experience of putting together this resource and any challenges that COVID presented in terms of collecting the information, sharing it as well.
I can take this one.
Okay.
If there is no answer, it's okay too.
No, they're good. They'll talk. This is the talking group.
I think with the pandemic, we were kind of given a very big roller coaster that we didn't sign on for almost, especially being in healthcare and pursuing nursing. Of course, we knew what we were kind of getting into, but not really. And the pandemic really ignited a fire in a lot of people, because a lot of us were left on our own and trying to figure out a program that we're not very familiar with. And nursing is a very, cultural and very group activity type of thing. We don't do things alone. We're very big on collaborating. We're very big on being a team. And the pandemic sort of took that away from us. That was one part. And the other part was just working on an OER. I think I speak for some of my peers and myself. And I mentioned it can be kind of daunting to be working alongside so closely with faculty. And it's always a problem in institutions. Students feel like they can't voice out what they're thinking, and oh my gosh, if I say that, what are my professors going to say? So I think that was the biggest step for most of us. Speaking for myself personally, and I'm sure my peers will agree, I think that was the more scary part, more than the pandemic, to be honest with you, for myself. But I think the pandemic took away the team aspect sometimes, and we fought really hard to bring it back. And I think we did a really wonderful job in bringing that team effort back. And that's why the result is so awesome as the way it is. But I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it does. And I mean, the results, you're right, really do show that you were able to overcome or get through those challenges. Absolutely. We do have another question/comment. How about colleges for practical nursing, 2 or 3 years programs?
we would love to have them take this program up. It is open, as I said, as an open educational resource, but it would really have to go through the whole process of the administrators if they would take it up. So if anyone could be an advocate for this would be really good, because it is a form of social justice and activism, that if someone could, you know, at the school or in the working with the unions, say that they want this on the program, this would be a good resource for them to make changes.
Excellent. So there are no more comments or questions, but again, everyone in our audience, the link is in the chat. Oh, actually, I apologize. Irma, you just raised your hand, so you go right ahead and ask your question. You can unmute yourself as well. Oh, Irma, you're still muted. Did you want to try typing your question in the chat? We can't hear you.
You hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, you did a wonderful presentation today.
Thank you.
I would say that racism, from my experience, I'm a registered nurse and I've taught in the collaborative program, BSCN program. It's rooted in racism.
Yeah.
From my experience, we are not seeing a lot of us as professors in the program teaching. And I think that's a problem. I think we should have more of our people so that when students come in, they can see a diverse of teachers, not just one, you know, group of teachers teaching the program. We are all, you know, educated people. So opportunities should be there for, you know, up and coming young professors. As far as the taking the racism program to other universities and sort of embedding it in other curriculums, I think that's a must as we go along in nursing, because we'll be seen as just secondhand people in nursing. So therefore, that racism needs to be addressed, because patients sometimes, when they see a Black nurse or a nurse of color, the first thing is, I don't want that nurse. Give me another nurse, you know? And those things need to change. So therefore, if we're going to continue to give very good care, compassionate care, that sort of thing, you know, racism as a program needs to be embedded in the nursing curriculum.
Yes.
But you have done a wonderful program today.
Thank you
and I
so
thank you
much.
for it.
Thank you. And I'm sure all the students really appreciate it. They worked so hard. And one of the beautiful things that we experienced, that we had all people on this, and we realize it's the work of humanity to make this change. So just touching your point, Irma, we really appreciate it. We do want to see nursing change, because this is a place where people come to get health, to have better health. But the studies are showing us that Black and racialized people, their health is going down. And these are the health even of nurses. At Toronto Metropolitan University, we are working hard to address anti-Black racism, but not many other universities. Actually, TMU, which is Toronto Metropolitan University, is the only one I know that is actually really working to address racism. So, you know, we do ask for the public to push for this this resource to be put into every school. The last report by the RNAO, which is the Registered Nursing Association, let me get it right, Registered Nursing Association of Ontario, they have said that anti-Black racism should be in the curriculum. And so we hope that people will, you know, talk about to their colleagues or their contacts about this. Also, just my last point on this as well is that you're absolutely right. If people do not see representation, they feel they don't belong. And this is one of the things that we worked on. And Samin was the one, she was the connection that Lorene got to connect with us. We said we have to go into the history, and everybody should see a representation of themselves, that it wasn't just the lady with the lamp, Florence Nightingale, there were other people who created nursing. And so we want to see this continue in the universities, in the colleges, that people will see representation. So thank you for your points. They're really valid. And hopefully you will push for this in other areas to be, and not even just in nursing, in any area, they can use this resource.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Irma.
Thank you, Irma, for your comment and also for your service as a nurse, and to anyone else in our audience who is in the nursing profession or medical profession. You're greatly appreciated. And I'm also so grateful that Samin reached out to me and asked about Marie Scott last year, and that it's led to this presentation. And you're absolutely right. Incorporating the history is really significant, but you're also showing people what they can do now, which is why I think this presentation is so significant. So thank you everyone for joining us today and for your great questions and comments. And again, thank you so much to our presenters. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Have
you
a
so
nice
much.
day.
Thank you all.
Greatly